Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very privileged to run this session. My name is Eugeniusz Smolar. I am a senior fellow at the Center at the Polish Institute for International Relations. And the subject and I welcome all of you, and I welcome some very particular guests, like the Alexander Milikiewicz, who just arrived here, former ambassador, United States ambassador to Poland, Victor Rush, a very dear friend of ours, which we are very privileged to have you back here in a different capacity. He now oversees Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, among other things, which still exists, and other very prestigious guests, ambassadors, and you ladies and gentlemen. We have a subject which is assessing the color revolutions, lessons for Belarus, Moldova, and Ukraine, but we have a panel which is slightly broader, because we have, for example, a friend from Hungary, a very experienced political scientist, political observer. We have a representative of the international organization called Community of Democracy, for Democracy? Of Democracy. So it's Wspólnota Demokracji, which Poland was one of the founding fathers in the year 2000. And it is a question of color revolutions, not per se, but what did they do in the whole region? What they do in terms of the perception of what happened in the region in the West, that means in Europe, European Union, in the United States of America, and also how did it influence the experience, a modern, I don't know, I don't want to use the word revolution, but the modernizational experience of other countries which are aspiring to the European Union and the community of Western democracies. And because of the particular situation, not because it starts with B, like Belarus, but I would like to start with the man who actually signed the dissolution of the Soviet Union, which is a pleasure to welcome the former President of Belarus, Mr. Shushkevich, among us, and to ask a question. We all sympathize with what happens in Belarus, the political prisoners, the repressions, attack on civil society, on all independent forces. But the question is, to what extent what happened with the Orange Revolution in Ukraine and other so-called color revolutions did influence what happened in Belarus and, in your view, in other so-called post-Soviet states, who are now independent, sovereign states. But also you are, of course, most welcome to speak also about Belarus. We couldn't prevent it. Bardzo prosimy. Pan prezydent będzie mówił po polsku.
Dziękuję bardzo za Pana pytanie. Sytuacja w Białorusi nie jest zrozumiała dużo dla kogo. Тому я muszę troszeczkę wytłumaczyć, co takiego Białoruś.
The microphone needs to be switched on, I think, before you... To z polsku założyć?
Ja przepraszam. Znaczy...
I wish to apologize. Thank you for your question. The situation in Belarus is quite not understood, and therefore I need to explain how Belarus is different from the other countries of the Eastern Europe. The point is that we were the most Russified and we are the most Soviet. And it wasn't like this in other Soviet republics. It happened that Belarus, after October 1917, was an agricultural country. And also it lost most of its intellectual elite in the 20s and the 30s, when this elite was destroyed in Russia, in Belarus, equally. And since we had about 15 times fewer people in Belarus compared to Russia. Our intelligence was quite destroyed. Our intellectual elite was destroyed. And also, we lost this intellectual elite after the war. Our country changed after the World War II, and we became an industrial country versus agricultural country. Minsk had fewer than 50,000 inhabitants, but it developed more than any other city in the world. Now it has over 2 million inhabitants, and this intellectual elite became different. It was invited to transfer Belarus into an assembling factory, and therefore we had all kinds of industries, computers, tractors, etc. Also, some factories were transferred from Vilnius to Minsk, and therefore there was no well-structured intellectual elite. Everything started in 1988. There was a national front which formulated what we wanted in Belarus. I was really involved in the Soviet cause, and Belarus wanted to rise against the communist reality. We wanted independence. This was the situation in Belarus, unlike the situation in other countries. And now there is a simple question: how the revolution in Kiev, in Tbilisi, and previously in the Baltic countries, they were not that color revolutions, influenced. I don't think they influenced us a lot. The people who fought for our independence were ready for it anyway, and it did not influence our nation in a special way. There was a specific situation in Belarus, and the example in the elections of 1996 proved that we had no elections, not even where the votes counted. Up until December last year, we had more people out in the streets than in the Maidan square in Kiev. Our ruthless authority was ready to stand against those people. It gathered all the policemen, all the people from militia who would beat those people, and it proved that they wanted to quench this fire. Also, these cases when people were beaten were not even discovered. Very few cases were really discovered, and the militia and really fought against policemen, because some policemen were not dressed in uniforms, and they made a mistake and also beat their own forces. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's an interesting thesis, because when we look at it from the outside, it seems that it's an emotional system of united vessels. This frontier between Belarus and Ukraine is open, and it might seem that what happened in Ukraine influenced Belarus. Let's then ask Mr. Mykola Ryabchuk. Is your impression the same, that whatever happened in Ukraine did not influence neighboring countries like Belarus? But I would also like for you to concentrate on the question whether we dealt with the color revolution when we spoke of Orange Revolution. Does the mic work? Yes.
Most of the time I feel very uncomfortable speaking English in Poland. Yeah, that's okay. Well, first question is rather simple. Of course, any event in the world has some impact on the globe, but especially on the neighboring country. And I believe that all this events in Eastern Europe are interconnected. I believe that Ukrainian Orange Revolution was a sort of part of longer process which began probably in 1989 in Eastern Europe, but in Ukraine it was delayed because of many reasons and arrested and aborted. But basically, I consider all these processes as a part of the same, as an attempt of East European nations to get rid of authoritarian rule, get rid of some rigid ideology of dominance of clans, and Ukraine was part of this. So of course we can speak about domino effect, about impact of Slovak revolution and Anti-Magyar and Serbian and Georgian and so on. But basically it's a general process. It's a process which is noticeable and visible all over the world. Liberal democracy is the most attractive system in today's world, and obviously people all over the world, they strive to establish this system in their countries, more or less successfully. I don't think that Ukrainian revolution was actually a revolution. At least it was failed revolution, and now we have to recognize this. It was attempt at the revolution. If you consider any attempt at revolution as revolution, of course it was revolution, and it was very spectacular revolution. But actually it did not make whatever a real revolution is supposed to do. Orange Revolution removed ancien regime. Orange Revolution fixed violations of electoral law and so on, but failed to change institutions. Institutions were not changed completely. Rules of game were not changed. So this is profound difference between...
Why they were not?
Well, it's a good question. I think that Ukraine's society proved mature and strong enough to protest against the violations of electoral law, to protest against falsification of elections, but not mature enough to eventually control the new leaders. Unfortunately, I feel guilty myself. I feel the entire Ukrainian society guilty because we did not force our new leaders to carry out necessary reforms. And within the first months of their rule, it was visible, it was quite clear that they are not prepared. They are not they're not strong enough leaders to implement the much needed reforms in Ukraine. And society was not strong enough to force them. There was kind of euphoria after the revolution, and there was very short period of very high trust in the new government. So basically they could achieve a lot. It was very short window, very short period, but there was window of opportunity when the entire rules of game could be changed. They were not. So Ukraine leaders are still playing with rules, not by rules, and this is the main problem. I feel.
I'm sure we will return to Ukraine, but one question, one observation which has been formulated very often is that what the Orange Revolution definitely did is it did create and strengthen the public opinion, independent public opinion, the vibrant civil society, the media, etc., etc., and it still remains as strong as it was?
Well, it was really great achievement of the Orange Revolution because it liberated society, and within 5 years we had really very vibrant media environment, and we had free and fair elections, twice parliamentary and presidential elections, which were recognized free and fair. But the very easiness with which all these achievements were dismantled proves that they were not properly institutionalized. Ukraine after the revolution did not become a genuine democracy. It became, I would say, a very loosened, very weakened authoritarianism, because it was democracy, but which was not based on the rule of law. It was dysfunctional democracy. The democracy which disappoints people, cannot deliver, and ultimately, of course, such democracy fails. And the very easiness with which all the achievements were dismantled, and they were dismantled within 1 year by Mr. Yanukovych and his team, it proves that it was not well established, properly institutionalized democracy. Of course, today we have very disturbing tendencies, I would say. I remember 1 year ago, Alex Motel, after this parliamentary coup d'etat in Kiev, wrote an article about Yanukovych's Gleichschaltung, probably referring to Germany of 1933. Of course, I wouldn't go so far in comparison, because the Ukrainian regime is not ideological. But what, as I understand Motel's statement, he meant probably that even if we have democratic, free and fair elections, it doesn't mean that such a government would behave eventually democratically. And we have a lot of signs of such a behavior. Monopolization of power is occurring in Ukraine. It's a very disturbing phenomenon. And I'm not sure that new elections in 2012 would be as free and fair as they used to be within the previous period. Actually, we have a very bad sign from last year when we had local elections in Ukraine, and first of all, they were postponed for half a year, very opportunistically by the new government. It's against the constitution. They could not be.
I'm sure, Mykola, we will return to Ukraine in a moment. I want to have the first round of opinions, and then we can go into details and also bring the public with their questions. Well, now over to a new shining example of progress in terms of transformation. This is Moldova, and we are privileged to have with us Mr. Igor Munteanu, who is a Moldovan ambassador to the United States. So maybe we'll bring also some transatlantic perspective. But the question is, well, as you know, Poland, Polish diplomacy, and Mr. Radosław Sikorski personally got involved, traveled there, brought also Mr. Westerwelle. That means to strengthen the democratic tendency in Moldova. But before we go into details of situation in Moldova, maybe I can ask you more or less the similar question. To what extent your own specific development was somehow influenced by the other developments in the region, but since Moldova is where it is, not only in Eastern Europe, but also looking to the south. That means maybe experience of Bulgaria and Romania, maybe experience of Central European countries in their transformation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very happy to attend this session with such challenging topics. First of all, I would like to share the prudential statement of Mr. Ryabchuk concerning the use and abuses of the terminology, the revolutions, but irrespective to the colors in which we paint the political shifts in our country. That's very clear that we have common denominators. The protests in the street, starting from the fact that people accused the administration, the incumbents, of the rigged elections, of the fraudulent procedures in the electoral process. The incumbents were too strong to be defeated in the first round of elections, so second round of elections is taking place, and then a new alternative to power is emerging. Of course, you are very right that there is a great infusion of, let's say, social optimism from the changes across the region. And of course, we will not start by saying that the The Ukrainian revolution was the pioneer model of changing the political things in our country. We took some lessons from Slovakia with Mečiar. We took some lessons from Romania. I think we have Moldova had amazing similarities with Tahrir Square, which followed recently, because the violence was a result of the, I would say, spiral of silence. This is a concept that can describe exactly what is happening and what happened in Moldova. The constrained frustration of the population suddenly appeared to be stronger, the potential of the administration to keep under control the situation in the country. What exactly we have to judge? We have to judge on the basis of the results. And the results in Moldova in 2009 was the full replacement of the communist administration, the creation of an alternative government, a cabinet of ministers that was and is quite responsible. It received a good credit from the West, and it designed a vision for the country. What is unique for Moldova is, first of all, nobody predicted in 2009 the revolution in Moldova or the change in power in Moldova. I would say this was a kind of black swan, or a kind of revolution with no CNN, which is a contradiction in terms in our globalized and the global communications world. And since nobody predicted the Moldovan change in power, I would say that some people were quite happy with Voronin in power in 2009. It was a predictable evil. And with all its limitations, it was a predictable phenomenon. After 2009, when we started to implement important, let's say, steps in pursuing the fundamental changes and fundamental reforms, Mr. Ryabchuk, stated that unfortunately the revolution, the Orange Revolution, did not achieve what it stated, what was promised. And this is a common, again, a second denominator for all our changes in the region. We cannot avoid the structural difficulties in our countries. Rule of law is low. Corruption is high. Lack of competition in the market era, market sphere. And I was, of course, very well surprised to see that in the first session, the people spoke about not only political freedoms, but about economical freedoms. What Moldova, what kind of factors is still keeping Moldova low is the lack of competitiveness in the economical field, lack of guarantees to the business. And this is, these are the critical and the key fields where Moldova has to progress. We are very happy that the openness of the West and the fact that we can use wisely the Eastern Partnership and the various formats provided to us by the European Union by differentiation principle can bring us more benefits and more incentives for domestic reforms. And this is a key word that this defines today the changes in Moldova.
Thank you very much. As you hear, this is not a typical diplomatic talk, because, as you know, diplomat is a person who can talk for hours and say nothing, because we have here an ambassador who, in his previous life, as often happens in a revolutionary situation, was a think tanker, a political analyst, and that's what we've got. The one thing which really worries me is why the name Mečiar have popped out already 3 times during this interview. And I didn't understand, was it a revolution Mečiar style, which would worry me, or was it a revolution against Mečiar? Against Mečiar, okay, let's be clear, because, you know, we might ask, for example, about Hungarian experience, and we are going to do about in a moment. No, with Orban, maybe. All right. No. We move now to Istvan Gyarmati, and Istvan Gyarmati, an old friend, is a very seasoned political analyst who've been participating in the, he's running the International Center for Democratic Transition. How do you evaluate, from the questions which I asked already, here we hear about reversibility of achievements in Ukraine. Here we hear about Belarus, which is a case, seems to be an exceptional case of lack of movement. Moldova is moving with some difficulties. We just now had elections when I understand Mr. Voronin have regained some of his influence of his party. But he's not disappearing. He's there still. You know, we have a problem of frozen conflict, which must have influenced the behavior of the Moldovan democratic leaders. How do you, looking a bit from a Hungarian perspective, you are there in the region, but also as an analyst, how do you evaluate all those changes?
Let me start by telling, from a European perspective, what we have done or what we have done wrong not to help enough these countries to reach the point of no return. And I think we are, and that's partially a reason for the problems, increasing problems that we have in some of these countries. Answering also your question that our policies have not been coherent in the past few years. I think the first problem is that, and it's not the order of importance, that's how it comes to my mind. The first problem is that we have looked at these countries and the problems these countries face always through the prism of Russia. We either alienated Russia by supporting two radical changes which were not realistic, or more than that, we were trying to satisfy Russian needs and put our relations or perceived relations with Russia before the support for the changes in these countries. And I think it's very typical also especially in the case of Ukraine, but to some extent also in Belarus, unfortunately also in Moldova. The second problem I see is that we have done too little too late. We have promised much more than what we delivered. And the third one is, and that's my particular problem with the Eastern Partnership, is that the Eastern Partnership is basically a dead-end street. It might be a nice paved street to drive on, but there is a big wall, and behind the wall there is association and membership in the European Union, but you cannot break the wall. So I think the Eastern Partnership doesn't offer the perspective that would be really tempting to those countries. Therefore, I think the sooner the better we open this offer to the best countries, and I'm thinking of Moldova at this point, as a perspective for membership, the better and the more we will be able to support. I don't think that there is an irreversible revolution. There has been one in these countries, especially because I mean, it's a commonplace that democracy is a process. So even when you have a very established democracy, you have to work on it quite a lot. But especially in countries where you are moving towards democracy, and of course we don't have firm criteria when you reach this point of no return, if there is one. But I think we have really not been able to find out what really needs to be done, and we were not able to put the resources behind that. Now, of course, everything everything that happens there is basically happening in the country. We can help or not, but what needs to happen is determined by the people of that country. But I think what the people of the country think and what they hope from democracy is very different. I saw an opinion poll in Egypt, but I think it's very similar also in other countries. The question was, what do we expect from democracy? And the first answer was jobs. The second was higher salaries, and then came freedom, etc. And this is something that and that's understandable. We cannot blame the people for that. And I think this is something that these countries were not really able to make available to their citizens. And this is also, I'm look at my Estonian friend. I mean, Estonia, Latvia has had several problems with the Russian population, but I haven't heard of any Russian non-citizen who wanted to return to Russia. and be a citizen of Russia instead of being a non-citizen of Latvia or Estonia. And why? Because they have jobs and they have much better life in those countries, although they don't have citizenship. Now, of course, the best is a combination of the two, which would be possible in Moldova and, or in other countries. And my final word is about Moldova, and I know I'm not in majority with my view. I think we have put too much emphasis on a fast solution of the Transnistria conflict, and that's the only thing that gives Russia leverage over Moldova. All the other things are out of Russia's hands. So therefore, if we really want to offer Russia a place or an opportunity to slow down Moldova's democratization and Moldova's getting closer to Europe, the best way of it is trying to solve the Transnistrian crisis quickly with the agreement of the Russians. But I think that's what we have done. You see the latest offers, which I think are totally unrelated to the conflict. So in one word, I think what the lesson I draw that there has not been an irreversible revolution in those countries. There have been irreversible achievements that we should build upon, but it needs much more effort, of course, from the people and the countries concerned, but it needs much more effort from especially the European Union and the United States to help these countries to make it finally.
I would love to quarrel with you on two counts. For one, I think that, and we have here Alexander Rondelli from Georgia, who is the head of the institute, again, research institute. I think that we have underestimated the national priorities of those countries. That means the Georgia war is an example. That means something which look from the Brussels point of view an aberration. That means starting a war against mighty Russia, or not that mighty Russia, doesn't matter, because it actually destroyed several elements of the Eastern policy of the European Union and NATO. No, I'm saying about the war as a something which regaining Abkhazia and South Ossetia as a national objective, which was stated and is being stated. The same, I'm not sure about Moldova. How important can you, and this is a question, Ambassador, to you, can you, because you do have a clearer European sort of perspective nowadays, because of the changes which took place in Moldova, can you put the problem of Transnistria on the back burner? Can you wait with the solution of this problem?
Well, when we are speaking about the drivers of change in Moldova, we always start with the fact that there is a widespread support for the European membership in Moldova. We have more than 70% of the population that see the Moldova as a part of the European Union, whenever it will be a possibility. But some people try to translate this into kind of expected benefits from the integration. Secure life, jobs, whatever. Many people, however, ignore the fact that the second driving force, which is behind the predispositions to integrate with the European Union, is the feeling of insecurity. And the insecurity means Transnistria. Insecurity means this vital space of the Russian Federation, or the space that Russian Federation want to embrace it as a vital space. And of course, we do not feel secure in the conditions when we have foreign troops in our territory, when we have Transnistria as an instrument for chantage, for blackmail against the will and decisions of the legitimated government in Chisinau. And we know exactly that the largest part of the administration in Tiraspol, the people that form it, they have never lived in the region before the conflict in 1992. What happened in Georgia in 2008, it happened to us in 1992. As a kind of push, as a kind of blow for the will to become an independent country.
But when given a choice, your government you represent, I'm talking about now elites, not about the population as such, would it be possible for you politically and emotionally, and also from the point of view of your support you have to get in elections, to say, we are ready to wait for solving the Transnistria problem, let's say, for another 10, 15, 20, 25 years? Can you say it openly?
looking at
the record.
Looking in the polls, in the surveys, the public believe the Transnistrian issue is not in the first 6 or 7 issue of the country. The most important elements are access to jobs, future of the children, corruption, whatever. For elites, it's very important because you cannot impose the rule of law on the territory of Moldova if we still have an unsettled conflict with threats strategical threats to the population in Moldova. Transnistria and Tiraspol is 70 kilometers from Chisinau. Mm-hmm. They have 3 times larger military capabilities than the national army. And for several years, we try to, not we, but some international organizations try to ignore the threats that are emerging from this region, to the expense and to the benefit of some political talks with Russia.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Professor Bronislaw Misztal, again a political scientist, but now a sociologist, now in Poland, back from the United States, worked with Radosław Sikorski, was the head of his political cabinet, and now he's running this is what is called a permanent secretariat of the Community of Democracies, which is the intergovernmental organization, which has, he will tell us how many members of it. I'm sure that's something like 80 democracies of the world. But the question which I'd like to put to you is, first of all, to react to what you hear, but also to what extent do you respond to what Istvan have said, that we, Europe, but also maybe United States, didn't do enough to help to promote changes there, pro-democratic changes in those countries?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will not answer this question directly because probably I can't, but I wanted to address, I would like to change the tenor of this discussion a little bit, because I would like to address the questions that have not been asked here, but I believe that they are implicit. And I see 3 or 4 questions like this. One, which I believe was sort of tinkering in Mr. Shushkevich's presentation, is it possible that a color revolution would take place in Belarus? We are all very much interested. Another is a question about the, so to speak, durability or veracity of the color revolution in Ukraine. I mean, has the Ukrainian revolution, I mean, is it going to come back and is it going to be successful? Then there is a question about Moldova, which means to what extent the Moldovan thing really is a revolution. It certainly is a change, and whether it actually has some sort of a political and moral promise for Europe, especially since Europe is and Poland is so much keen on the success of Moldovan revolution. So to those things, I would like to tell you that first of all, there are revolutions and revolutions. Revolutions usually are structural endeavors, which means that they happen when there is some sort of a friction and when there is some sort of dynamics of major sectors of society. In the old days, they were called classes. You may call them differently, but you have large groups of people that are actually in some sort of heads-on collision. The fact that you have a large group of people coming to a Tahrir Square or to any other place in the city does not necessarily constitute a revolution. It is a manifestation of will, but this is not a revolution. A revolution is a durable transformation of social, political, and cultural structure of society. If it is not durable and if it is not deep, it's not a revolution. Now, color revolutions, they happen in very particular types of societies that I personally call decapitated societies. Those are societies which, due to political pressures, they are lacking fully developed social structure. Which means that, for example, they don't have cultural elites, or they don't have a large group of political elite. They don't have fully developed political class. And then they take color. Now, the other question that we would like to ask more general is whether political revolutions of the type of color, they replicate, they diffuse, which means whether there actually one can affect another, and if so, is it going to be a domino effect? And then, if it happens, can they actually produce durable results, irreversible results? Now, my answer to this is that actually we see that most of those color revolutions and also some of those so-called flower revolutions, they actually come in cycles. Last Sunday, I believe the cycle of the Carnation Revolution in Portugal was closed with the defeat of the socialist government and a considerable change in this country. So for Europe, the question is how much promising those revolutions are. And then, of course, for the community of democracies, for political regimes, the question is at what point you can invest in changes in those countries with some reasonable expectation that it's going to be a good investment, that it's going to contribute to the well-being of the people, to contribute to the improvement of human rights and so on. And my understanding is that that the way Europe or the way the United States or the way intergovernmental, international organizations are dealing with those countries that color revolutions have been taking place is frequently inadequate to what those countries need. Because they take for granted what is being manifested and frequently expressed, like over at the Maidan Square in Ukraine, as an indication of success already. The expression of opinion of people and the ability of societies to implement the change of those opinions into a lasting political configuration. Those are two different things. So I believe that the international community should be keeping in mind that there is a long process, which is frequently educational process. It's actually a process of institution building in those countries that should be following the color revolutions, that should actually be going step by step after those color revolutions before they can solidify, because before they consolidate, and before they actually, maybe in a softer way, this is what we would like to say, that color revolutions are a manifestation of soft power, and therefore that they make social change, political change more pleasant. Now, I have never seen political change being pleasant to anybody. It is usually dramatic. It is usually violent. People are defending their positions. They cross swords not only verbally, but frequently physically. Sometimes blood is being shed, sometimes not, but they are very intense. And now we would like to believe that by promoting and solidifying the accomplishments of those color revolutions, that we can spare societies the type of bloodshed that the 20th century's revolutions have seen. It is problematic. My answer to this is in the short run is 10 years or 20 years, maybe this can be accomplished. But there is something which historians call the longue durée of political processes. And then I would say that the 20th century actually, the 21st century is actually going to be a century where we are going to see the setback to many of the hopes that have been harbored in the end of the 20s and beginning of the 21st centuries. Of course, looking forward, looking towards what both Istvan and I are having in common, which means an interest in promoting those democratic transitions. We would like to believe that whether in Egypt or in Tunisia, or certainly in Moldova, that those changes that took place, they can actually lead to a more solidified thing. Now, it would be nice to believe that there will be no more drama on the streets. I actually, this is the way I took our moderator's question about the Transnistrian issue, because ultimately this is an issue of a major rift within a society. I mean, can you put it aside and not address it? Or is it going to come back to some sort of